Hey YouTube, it's Tim with the Tim Woodward YouTube channel, back at it again. This time I got a tech video for you. I had previously put a data doubler in my Mac Mini. However, I had used a really cheap SSD off of Amazon that had come to bit me in the butt. It failed. So now we're putting in a nice reliable Samsung SSD. I'm going to show you the process so that way, you know, if you got any questions or you want to do a data doubler, add a SSD to your Mac Mini, you can go ahead and do that. So let's get to it. Alright, so here I have a mid-2011 Mac Mini. As I had said, it already does have the data doubler in. So it has its stock 500 gig hard drive, and then it also has currently a 60 gig Patriot SSD. The Patriot SSD failed, so we're going to be pulling that out. We're going to be putting in the Samsung SSD. It's, you know, one of the most reliable ones that are on the market. You know, that's what I'm looking for, something nice, reliable, so that way we can have, you know, have this running for years and years to come. It is no longer officially supported with Mojave, but it currently serves as iTunes media server, and I have my shared libraries running off of this to all my other computers, my Apple TVs. So this is kind of the hub of everything. So with this being down, it's definitely made things difficult. But we're gonna go ahead and get that straightened out. So this tutorial, which is gonna be about 85 to 90%, just because there's some things that are not gonna be that won't apply, or that will apply to first timers, that I'm not going to do just because it's already been done and I've set my internals up in a certain way, so that way I don't have to pull everything completely apart every time I want to get in and swap out an SSD or something like that. But this should apply, as far as I know, to any unibody Mac Mini, so that's anything, I believe, late 2010 up through the most current model, which was released 4 years ago, which is awesome. Thanks, Apple. But anyways, so you will first take off the cover and expose the internals of your Mac Mini. Also wanted to say I do have the iFixit basic toolkit. There is a bigger one that's got more stuff, but this has all the basic tools that you need for any Mac repair. So it's got really everything that I need. For this, we will need the plucker tool, your screw, hard drive, logic board remover, and 2 bits, your Torx T6 and Torx T8, I believe. But anyways, so here, internals of the Mac Mini. We're gonna first pop out the memory modules and set those aside. And once those are out, we then want to go ahead and start pulling out screws. So you will need to remove these 3 primary screws. So we will get started there, and I will need the Torx T8 for those. The pace of this video may also be a little bit quick, especially for a beginner that's trying to figure out how to do additional storage in their Mac Mini. I do apologize. I've done this kind of a couple different times, so I might kind of fly through things or maybe take certain shortcuts in other places. For a true beginner, if this video is kind of difficult to follow, I would recommend the just want to loosen this up. I would recommend the video that OWC has. It's fairly easy to follow. There are some parts of the video that kind of move a little quickly where you might have to kind of pause, rewind, and replay. But for the most part, I found that video very easy to follow the first time that I had done this. So I definitely recommend that. But if you kind of stick with me here and follow along, you might be able to get this taken care of without viewing their video. So anyways, I had removed the 3 primary screws that the cover latches onto, then loosened up the 2 screws that hold the hard drive, or in this case the SSD, in place to the back of the airport mesh, and I have just loosened up the 3 screws that hold the fan in place. So what we'll go ahead and do is remove the fan, and you don't want to pull too hard because, as you can see here, the fan connector is still connected to the logic board. So you want to use your pry tool, just pluck that connector up, and then you can go ahead and set your fan aside. The next thing that we'll want to go ahead and do is remove this piece. I'm not 100% sure what it's really there for, but I don't want to remove it and, you know, end up needing it for something. It's essentially just a little plastic piece. I think more so than anything, it's probably for heat. There are heat pipes here on the logic board that it does cover up. So I'm assuming that it's you know, for kind of the thermal control within the computer. So at that point, once you have that removed, you'll set that aside, and you will go ahead and pull up and pull out on the airport mesh. Once again, don't pull too hard. There is a cable attached, and if you pluck that out, you will need to figure out what you're going to do for Wi-Fi, because it won't work. So then you just pluck that connector up and you'll pull the cable out, and you can once again set that aside. At this point, everything is more or less exposed. You have here your logic board. Right here is the Patriot SSD that had failed. What we're going to go ahead and do at this point is go ahead and with how I have this set up, I don't believe that I need to remove the logic board or pry the logic board out, but I am going to go ahead and do so just to kind of make things a little bit easier. So what you will go ahead and do, first you will remove a couple more screws. There's a screw here on the logic board. You'll remove that, and there we go. And once that is removed, we can go ahead and pull out the logic board. So you'll slip the logic board removal tool out. This does not come in the iFixit kit. This came with the OWC data doubler. But you'll essentially stick this in the 2 holes on the logic board, and once you do that, you'll then push forward, and that pulls everything out. So at that point, you can then, there's a couple clips on the side that might kind of pull a little bit, but you'll pull this out a little bit, and that's, I mean, that's really enough for me to get in and do what I need to do. Under normal circumstances, you'll pull this out a little bit further. You'll pluck the power connector off the connector that feeds the power to the logic board from the power supply. And then you'll actually remove the power supply by turning the plug at the end and removing a clip, and then you'll pull the power supply out, and that'll actually give you full, complete access to the internals of the Mac Mini. But as I had said, with how I have things set up, I don't need to do that. What I am going to go ahead and do is pluck the hard drive connector off, or the SSD connector off. You can see here the connector, and then here's the original 500 gig hard drive. Here's the Patriot SSD that had failed. So we're going to take this and just set it aside. It has now become electronic waste. So we'll then connect the hard drive cable to the Samsung SSD, and once we do that, we'll go ahead and put this back in the Mac Mini. We'll just slide it in here and attach this connector like so, and now we can go ahead and start getting everything back into its original place. So we'll go ahead and slide the logic board back in, and now that the I/O ports are flush, there it is, it clicked. So now you know everything's good there. What we'll go ahead and do now, I'm not loving how this is sitting, but that actually should be good. Alright, so now that we have the SSD back in, we have the logic board back in, we'll screw down the logic board. And this is using a Torx T6 screw. It may take a little bit of just kind of experience, but at this point I find it fairly easy to tell the difference between which ones require the T6 bit and which require the T8. You know, like I said, it might just be a matter of your eye kind of getting used to what, you know, what's the bigger bit and which is the smaller bit, or, you know, which screws require the bigger bit versus which screws require the smaller bit. So we'll go ahead and reinstall the plastic cover here, which, like I said, I'm assuming is for thermal control within the computer. And we'll get the screw lined up. There we are. And that is a really tiny screw, which requires your T6 bit. And slide that in place, tighten it down, and that's good. So now you want to go ahead and reconnect your airport mesh here, but first we got to reconnect the airport connector to and this, I will say, ladies and gentlemen, this is definitely the hardest part, is reconnecting this specific connector. It's kind of hard to get to, and it's but it's been done. It's really hard to get to, and the way the cable is, I'm not a huge fan of it. And it's kind of the part that I struggle with every single time that I do this. But it's now been done, so you now slide that back in place and put it, lower the lower it down, it'll snap into place there, and at this point you can reconnect the two outer screws that hold that down. You can also tighten down the two screws here which hold the SSD to the unit. These require the T8. I believe they all require the T8 bit from here on out. So let me go ahead and do that. And there we go. Sometimes things don't line up 100% initially, and it requires a little bit of additional finesse. But once you get everything snapped in, it is good to go. So you'll now reinstall these two kind of latch points for the bottom cover, and just tighten that down. That will secure the mesh that the airport is connected to. Alright, so I'm going to check this out. There's probably a it's probably not snapped into place 100%, but I'm going to check this out and get back to you here. I'm actually going to move forward with the tutorial. We'll just kind of just ignore that this screw is not done up 100%. This just probably has to snap into place a little bit more securely, a little bit more snugly. You know, the way Apple's engineered Macs ever since going unibody, everything's really a precise fit. And you know, if things are off by a millimeter, it makes all the difference. So I'm going to move on from this for a second, just for the sake of having the video not be forever. But what you will go ahead and then do is reinstall the fan. And before you reinstall the fan, or when you're reinstalling the fan, you want to reconnect the the fan connector to the logic board. Just one thing to really make sure of, just because I did this my first time around, is make sure that that fan connector is 100% flat. Mine had snapped in, but it wasn't 100% flat. Because of that, my fan actually wasn't running. I went ahead and plugged everything in, turned everything on, and then all of a sudden, within 5 minutes, my Mac is incredibly hot, to the point where, the internals are probably cooking. Obviously turned it off, unplugged it, let it sit for a while to cool down. Come to find out, it wasn't 100% flush. It wasn't, installed completely flat. Because of that, that connector, wasn't actually connected, and the fan wasn't running. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Make sure that you're, that you have that done. Once again applies here. Since the unibody redesign, and even somewhat before that, Apple has all these designed so well as far as, being such a small footprint, but also, cooling really well with the fans and how they have the internal set up. But that all is dependent on the fan actually being plugged in, being working. So if the fan's not plugged in, you have yourself this is a little stove. Without the fan, this turns into like a little mini George Foreman or something. So make sure that that fan's all connected up. When you first turn it on, and this is definitely something that I suggest, when you first turn it on, put your finger here, and you'll hear the fan spool up. But if you don't have 100% great hearing, just put your hand back there. When that fan does spool up on boot, you'll kind of feel a little push of air quickly. That's how you know that that fan's working, is plugged in. If you don't feel that, you might want to double check, pull everything out, make sure that it is. But as I had said, you'll go ahead and reinstall the fan. You'll then reinstall your two memory, your two RAM cards, and then put the final connector here back on top. And once that is done, you will go ahead and put the bottom plate back on, tighten it up, turn it on. You will have to boot up in your already existing OS or boot up into a recovery tool, so that way you can get access to disk utility to initialize the new SSD before you can go ahead and install Mac OS on it or anything like that. But other than that, you're all right. So we went ahead and we got that old Patriot SSD pulled out of there. We put a brand new Samsung SSD in there, and this Mac is ready to rip. So we're gonna get it plugged in, we're gonna get it turned on, gonna get Mac OS installed, get everything set back up, and we'll be good to go. As always, if you didn't like the video, you can throw a dislike. You can put the thumbs down. But I would ask that in the comments, give me some constructive criticism. Let me know how I can do better next time. Get that thumbs down, turn thumbs up. But if you did like the video, like, subscribe, share, let everyone know about these videos. Let everyone know about the Tim Woodward YouTube channel. We'll get this thing growing. We got more videos on the way covering a whole big spectrum of things. Golf, cars, racing. Got some more tech videos on the way if that's your thing. So stay tuned. Until then.